Today is October 6, 2021. Welcome to the Lee County Board of County Commissioners Hearing Examiner. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good morning. This morning I am going to be chairing the meeting. My name is Cecil Pendergast, the vice chair. Our chairman is preoccupied this morning with some other county business, so he's not able to be here this morning. And we have staff present the first case.
Yes, sir. Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners, good morning. Mr. Danley is going to handle both staff presentations this morning. Take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dirk Danley. I'm a senior planner in community development. We have two cases for you today. The first one is under case number DCI 2020-14. It's the Three Oaks Logistics Center. It's a request to rezone 75.85 acres from agricultural to mixed-use plan development to allow up to 1,050,000 square feet of commercial, retail, and industrial uses. The project is separated by Oriole Road. It's kind of half and half on the east and west side. The west side is requested to have 500,000 square feet with a limit to 20% commercial and retail uses. And then the east side is 550,000 square feet with up to 80% commercial retail uses. The hearing examiner recommended approval with conditions, and there were no participants of record. Staff and the applicant are here for any questions that you may have.
Great. We'll come back to the board. Any questions from the board for staff?
No questions right now.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
No, sir. We concur with the hearing examiner. Thank you.
Okay. We'll come back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I've read through the staff report, I've read through the hearing examiner's report. I agree with the findings and conclusions of the hearing examiner, and there were no public participants of record, so I'll go ahead and make a motion for approval of the hearing examiner's recommendation.
We have a motion for approval.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any other discussion?
No, it's that area has grown, as we all know. It's a great piece of land. We're running out of land and stuff like this, so the demand for something like this, whether it's today or tomorrow, will be the same. So it's going to be a nice site.
Thank you. And any objection to the motion? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you. Next case.
Okay, the next case, our final case, is Sanibel Passage RD. It's DCI 2021-00006. This case is simply to amend an existing resolution, Resolution 0404A, to allow deviation from the Land Development Code, Section 10-291, which requires two means of ingress and egress for residential plan developments or residential developments over 5 acres, to allow only a single means of ingress and egress. The hearing examiner did recommend approval of the deviation as well as moving forward the existing conditions of approval, and there were 6 participants of record. Staff and the applicant are here for any questions that you may have.
Great. Come back to the board for questions from staff.
You know, I just have a question for either our staff or our county attorney. So today's task in front of the commissioners is really just to review the merits of the deviation, not to reopen the entire case. That's correct, right?
Yes, sir. The case before you is just on the deviation. The existence of the approval back in 2004, 2005 is not before you.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just for the record, so this was originally approved in 2004 and 2005 for the prior board and not doing that.
Correct. I believe it's 2004.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff on this case? Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
No. Neil Montgomery for the record. No, I don't want to make a presentation. I appreciate your question because I think that's the essence of the people's concern. They're concerned about density, but it's already approved, and as the hearing examiner noted, it's 0.23 units per acre. The conservation easements were granted already in reliance on the approved plan, so that without releasing those conservation easements, you couldn't put another access on. So the property owner moved forward in reliance on the 2005 approval, and we agree we're just here for the one deviation. So if you have questions, we'll respond.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for the interruption, but could you just give us a brief summary on, I know you reviewed the traffic impacts related to the deviation, and could you just talk about that real quick?
Well, there are no traffic impacts related to the deviation. The traffic impacts of the development for the 50 units were evaluated in 2005. They had actually already submitted for a development order before this issue came up because it was a different criteria at the time relative to the two means of ingress and egress. And hearing examiner doesn't fully go into it, but she alludes to the fact that at the time, it was up to the zoning director as to whether they needed two means of ingress and egress, and the director had determined that they didn't. But the process and the rules changed. So the only reason we're here is because the rules changed between 2005 and now, but the traffic impacts of the 50 units hasn't changed.
Yeah, and I could have formed my question better. I guess I was going to make the point that looking at this particular stretch of road and driving it, it seems like it makes more sense to have just the one point of conflict as opposed to 2 points of conflict potentially. And was hoping that maybe
Right.
you also had some.
And Jonathan Harbour, as you saw in the aerial that Dirk put up there, has only one means of ingress and egress. Punta Rasa essentially has one, and that is due to kind of the geography and the topography of the area. And you're right, you don't need more than one access point on a road where you're trying to keep traffic moving.
Right, okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
You know, my question is, I love history, and I know you brought up before, this was already approved in 2005, and I know a lot of improvements changed out there with Summerlin Road improvements and everything over the years. Do you represent this case back in 2005 by any chance, or were you involved in this case at all?
I was not involved in 2005.
Just trying to get more history out of it, and thank you for that. I wasn't sure who did then. I know the board then consists of Commissioner Judah.
I don't
Bigelow.
know, but I do know that the folks who own it now did extensive due diligence and had lots of meetings about, how it was going to be evaluated and, the buffers and, how to protect the mangroves and all that kind of stuff. So they did an extensive analysis before moving forward, in reliance on this. So, but it wasn't me in 2000.
I was just trying to, the history, I
Were
kind
you
of
involved
remember.
in 2005? Peter was, if you want to.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just remember the history because I remember trying to think of who was on the board at the time. It was Commissioner Judah, Bigelow, Mann, and James. I was just trying to remember all the history of the case and who represented it then. So, thank you. Okay, we'll come back to the board. With the applicant, nothing else for that? If not, we'll go to public comment. First speaker is James Evans. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm James Evans, Environmental Policy Director for the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. And I'm here on behalf of our more than 6,500 members. SECF owns 3 mangrove wetland parcels adjacent to the proposed Sanibel Passage development. And we acquired these lands to protect the many benefits of coastal wetlands that they provide in protecting and improving water quality, habitat for wildlife, and they are the first, and they are first line of defense against sea level rise and storm surge. We are opposed to this development project and the zoning request before you here today. The fact that the applicant is requesting a waiver to the Land Development Code for the secondary ingress-egress to avoid additional wetland impacts indicates that this is an inappropriate amount of development in an ecologically sensitive location. In addition, this project is being proposed in a coastal high hazard zone, which is subject to flooding, which will also be exacerbated by sea level rise. We believe that this project should be scaled back to better fit with the ecological conditions in this area, or should be eliminated altogether. The intensity of this development in this ecologically sensitive location and the impervious surface it creates will impact surrounding water quality, which is already impaired for nutrient pollution. Despite extensive work by Lee County and many others throughout the region, our water quality problems continue to be a problem. And we would just strongly urge you to not approve the zoning request before you here today. And we really thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jim Metzler. Is Jim here? Next speaker is Holly Milbrandt. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Holly Milbrandt, Director of Natural Resources for the City of Sanibel. While we appreciate the applicant's intent to minimize impacts to wetlands on site by seeking a deviation to allow a single ingress or egress versus the 2 that are required by the Lee County Development Code, We urge the county to continue to closely evaluate the intensity and impact of the entire project to be located in the coastal high hazard area and its potential impacts on our water quality, coastal resiliency, and hurricane evacuation. After reviewing the project's permit application submitted to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the City of Sanibel sent a letter dated November 5th, 2020, requesting that the Corps hold a public hearing to ensure that stakeholders are fully aware of the impacts of the proposed development and are given an opportunity to provide public comment. As you just heard, the City of Sanibel and others have worked diligently to bring awareness to local water quality issues and to address the nutrient impairments in the Caloosahatchee River and estuary. The proposed development will have direct impacts on mangrove wetlands that were not reviewed when the local government approvals were issued in 2005. Loss of mangrove wetlands will result in degradation of water quality, more severe coastal flooding, reduced protection from storm surge, and loss of wildlife habitat. The proposed development also has the potential to impact traffic patterns and slow hurricane evacuation, a key concern for the citizens of Sanibel. We appreciate the opportunity to provide comments on this application to the county today and for our continued partnership with the county to protect the environment and our economy of Southwest Florida. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Holly. Next will be Tom Schmidt. Tom here. Holly Swartz. And Mary Tracy Sigmund. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking as a private citizen, not professionally at all, but I do totally support the arguments that have just been presented to you. I live very close to where this development would possibly go, and I feel from my heart this should not ever have been permitted in the first place, so I'm not attributing blame to anyone, but it is not a suitable development for this particular area. I would think that allowing this variance would give a signal to developers that this kind of development is okay, and that possibly more developers would seek to do more developing in this kind of area. This is the time when we need to protect our wetlands, our mangroves, and these special lands. The storm surge and the water quality that we have right now needs to be protected. We don't need to impair it one bit more. So I'm just stating that I object that this can happen. I wish it couldn't happen. I wish it won't happen. But that's just the feeling that I have. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Mary. That's the last public speaker. We'll come back to the applicant. Will the applicant wish to address the board?
Briefly. The hearing examiner notes that 98.6% of this site is preserved or is open space. All the issues that you heard today were raised by Sanibel in the 2005 proceedings. They aren't germane to the issue today. The project's development footprint has not changed since what's approved, so we'd encourage you to uphold the hearing examiner. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to the board for discussion.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Again, you know, I'm sympathetic to the public comments that were made today, and I understand where they're coming from. However, the question before us today is, do we want to approve the deviation that would bring it down to just one access point? My understanding is if they were to try to do a second access point, that actually would impact more wetlands than doing only one access point. I think actually probably the right thing to do by the environment is to try to go ahead and approve the deviation so that we're only doing the one access point and the one crossing, if you will. So I've read through the hearing examiner's report. I thought it was very well done. Looking at the overall development as a whole, I don't know how I would have voted back in 2004 or 5. I wasn't on the board back then, and I don't believe, based on the comments from our attorney, that we have the ability to even relitigate that. So looking at the deviation and the hearing examiner's recommendation, I'll make an motion for approval of the hearing examiner's recommendation.
We have a motion?
I'll do a second. My comment, though, is when I first looked at this, the size of the parcel, relative to the development that was approved. The amount of the development that was approved is very small compared to the size of the parcel. So I don't think it's some outlandish plan that throws things out of whack. You know, I'm sensitive, as we all are. We're all citizens here. We're all sensitive to the wetlands and so on and so forth. I look for additional guidance from staff. I'm pretty comfortable with the deviation. So I'll second.
Thank you. You know, looking back historically, that's why I was asking Neil about history. I always assumed, living here all my life, and seeing this property even from the back side, from the water side, I was already an assumption years ago that this was all unprotected, being protected by environment, conservation because of the mangroves. And on the south side of Jonathan Harbor, I've been in some of those homes over the years, seeing that property from that water side, how beautiful it is, and not knowing until this case came up that was already approved, like in 2005. I was surprised to hear that. But again, we're so limited, as Commissioner Hammond said, we have no other choice than to approve this because the hearing examiner's approval for this. And this is, like I said, it's unfortunate, but we're here because of actions that took place in 2005. I'm thinking that the one interest will be better. It will be protected in that environment. I think, as Neil said, 98% of it's in conservation now. So, any other discussion from the board?
No, I just reiterate again, I agree with you. The conservation is beautiful. 94% of the property is actually in a conservation easement. That's really incredible when you look at the amount of wetlands that were preserved. And, you know, we spend a lot of money through the Conservation 2020 program to buy pieces of land just like this. We didn't have to buy this. This is the folks who did make that decision back in 2004 and 5 actually were able to acquire that much conservation at no expense to the taxpayers. And so that was really, I think, a good move. It's a lot smarter planning than what was done, obviously, decades ago, you know, before any of us were here. So
I think if we look at some of the new developments now, for instance, out east, you know, where 50% of the development goes into conservation. You know, that's really a template for managed growth, so to speak. And at 98.6, that's pretty sweet.
yeah.
Great, thank you. Without any more discussion, we'll call for we have a motion. We have a second. Any objections to the motion? No objection. Motion carries. And motion passes, and we are adjourned. Thank you.